So picture this, Green Valley Superstore. One of those massive, sprawling places built back in the 80s. All beige tiles that have seen better days and fluorescent lights that hum this constant, soul-crushing tune. I was working the graveyard shift there for a while. Yeah, I know, glamorous, pays the bills, mostly. My job was pretty simple. Wander the echoing aisles, restock a few shelves here and there, make sure no homeless guys were trying to nap in the pet food section, and generally just be a warm body until the morning crew rolled in. Most nights, the biggest excitement was a rogue raccoon setting off the loading dock alarm, or Henderson, the night manager, snoring loud enough to wake the dead from his little office. But then things started to get, well, weird, like really weird. It didn't happen all at once, you know? It started subtly, the kind of thing you brush off. I'd be halfway down aisle 7, that's cereals with all those grinning cartoon characters staring at you, and I'd get this nagging feeling that aisle 9, canned goods, wasn't quite where it was supposed to be. Just a slight shift. Maybe a few feet further down than I remembered from an hour ago. I'd shake my head, blame it on being tired. Those 3 a.m. brain fogs are no joke, right? But it kept happening. One night, I swear the entire pet food aisle seemed to have swapped places with cleaning supplies. I even found myself checking the overhead signs, thinking maybe I was the one who was lost, going crazy. The signs were right, but the layout, the feel of the place was fundamentally wrong. Like being in one of those dreams where the geography keeps changing just enough to make you question your own sanity. Then came the sounds. You're in a place that big, that empty. At night you expect some noises. The hum of the freezers, the building settling, but this was different. A soft thud from the frozen food section when I was clear across the store in produce, a good 100 yards away. The distinct, unmistakable skitter of a dropped can rolling across the linoleum floor, only to find absolutely nothing when I went to investigate, my flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive, heavy silence. Sometimes, and this was the part that really got under my skin, I'd hear what sounded like faint footsteps, always just out of sight, always in an aisle I'd just left or was about to enter. I started doing double, then triple checks of the security monitors in Henderson's little back office. Nothing, just static on a couple of the older cameras. Or empty aisles bathed in that ghostly green night vision glow. I tried mentioning it to Henderson. He's this portly guy, mid-50s, whose main job seemed to be consuming an endless supply of stale donuts and lukewarm coffee from a stained thermos. He just grunted, didn't even look up from his crossword. Place is old, kid. Settling. Rats, probably biggest cats in these old stores. Or your imagination running wild. Lay off the late-night horror movies. Easy for him to say, snoozing in his chair most of the night. But it wasn't rats, and it sure as hell wasn't my imagination. One particularly grim Tuesday morning, around 4 a.m. when the world outside was dead quiet, and the store felt like a tomb, I was restocking a shelf of pasta sauces in aisle 3. Pretty straightforward. I needed to grab a new case from the stockroom in the back. I walked down the main thoroughfare, the wide aisle that runs the length of the store, turned left where the double doors to the stockroom always were, and walked straight into a dead end. A solid wall of shelves, stacked high with industrial-sized cans of tomato paste, stretching from floor to ceiling. The stockroom entrance, the one I'd used 100 times, maybe more, was gone. Vanished. Completely blocked. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't a subtle shift of a few feet. This was impossible. I backed away, a cold sweat breaking out on my forehead, my hands clammy. I retraced my steps, my boots squeaking unnervingly loud in the dead silence. I tried a different approach, coming from the other end of the store, thinking maybe I'd gotten turned around. same result. The stockroom, our main artery for supplies, the place Henderson was supposed to check for deliveries, was inaccessible, walled off by products that shouldn't have been there, that couldn't have been moved there so quickly and silently. Panic, real and icy, began to set in. Was I losing my mind? Was this some elaborate, cruel prank by the day crew, though I couldn't imagine them staying this late? Or was something far more sinister, far more calculated, at play? I started thinking about the recent rumors, the hushed whispers among the day staff that I'd only half listened to before. Talk about inventory discrepancies, about how some high-value items, like expensive electronics, razor blades and baby formula, seemed to be shrinking at an alarming rate, despite the security tags and cameras. Henderson always dismissed it as supplier errors or brazen shoplifting. But what if it was more organized? What if it was an inside job or an outside one with inside help? What if someone or some organized group was using this massive, undersecured supermarket as their personal warehouse, their illicit playground during the dead hours of the night? And what if they were experts at moving through the store undetected, at reconfiguring sections with pallet jacks and brute force, at creating diversions to keep anyone away? The changing aisles, the strange noises, were they designed to confuse, to disorient, to keep the lone night shift employee away from certain areas at certain times? To make me doubt what I was seeing, what I was hearing, to make me think I was going crazy so I wouldn't report anything? It made a horrible kind of sense. The idea was chilling. It meant I wasn't alone in this vast, echoing concrete and steel space. It meant there were others, silent, unseen, and with potentially dangerous criminal intentions. Were they watching me right now on some hidden camera I didn't know about, laughing at my confusion, my growing fear? Were they professionals, cool and calculating, or just desperate opportunists who'd gotten bolder? The recent cutbacks in night security, just me wandering the floor in Henderson, who mostly slept in his chair, suddenly seemed incredibly foolish. Almost criminally negligent on the part of Green Valley management. They were practically inviting trouble. I tried calling Henderson on the store intercom system. No answer, just a faint crackle. I fumbled for my cell phone, my fingers slick with sweat. No signal. Not a single bar. That was new. Usually, I had at least a bar or two even deep inside the store. Were they jamming the signal? The thought sent a fresh wave of ice water through my veins. This was getting serious. This wasn't just settling noises anymore. I decided to make a circuit of the store, trying to appear calm on the outside, like I was just doing my regular rounds, all the while my senses were screaming, every nerve ending on high alert. Every shadow seemed to move, every hum of a distant freezer sounded like a whispered threat. The aisles did feel different, longer in places, the turns more confusing than they should have been. It was like the supermarket itself was a living, breathing, malevolent labyrinth, and I was the rat being herded, being played with. Then I heard it, a distinct metallic clang from the loading dock area at the very back of the store, a place that should have been locked up tight and completely empty at this hour. This was it. My fear was so intense, it almost became a strange kind of clarity, a cold resolve. I wasn't going to confront anyone. I wasn't a hero, and I wasn't paid enough for that. I just wanted to get out, to be somewhere safe. I headed for the emergency exit in the garden section, the one Henderson always grumbled about because kids sometimes propped it open with a rock during the day. As I fumbled with the stiff push bar, my hands shaking, I risked one last glance back. Down the long, dimly lit main aisle, I saw them. 3 dark figures, moving with a practiced, almost balletic silence, pushing a heavily laden pallet jack piled high with boxes, electronics by the look of them. They hadn't seen me. They were focused on their work, their crime, confident in their isolation. I didn't wait to see more. I slammed the emergency exit open, the alarm finally blaring belatedly, a shrill, useless sound in the vast emptiness, and ran out into the cold, pre-dawn air. I didn't stop running until I reached the all-night gas station, a quarter-mile down the road, my lungs burning. I called the cops from there, babbling my story to a skeptical-sounding dispatcher. They found the loading dock door pried open, a large, unmarked truck backed up to it, already half filled with stolen merchandise. Henderson was found tied up, but mostly unharmed, in his office. He claimed he'd been jumped from behind, hadn't seen anything clearly. The thieves, of course, were long gone by the time the first patrol car arrived. The stockroom entrance? When the cops checked, it was back where it always was. The shelves of tomato paste mysteriously relocated to their proper place, like nothing had happened. The official police report called it a professional and well-organized burglary. They figured the thieves had inside knowledge, maybe even keys or alarm codes. They must have been systematically altering parts of the store layout each night they operated subtly, at first then more boldly, to create confusion in corridors if anyone like me stumbled upon them, and then resetting it before the morning shift arrived. The dead cell signal was almost certainly a portable jammer, cheap and easy to get online. My labyrinth wasn't a hallucination. It was a carefully constructed, terrifying illusion, a psychological weapon designed to make me doubt myself. I quit Green Valley Superstore the next day. I couldn't shake the feeling that those thieves hadn't just been stealing goods. They'd been toying with me, aware of my presence, perhaps even enjoying my fear, my disorientation. They knew I was there, the lone, underpaid guardian of their illicit treasure trove, and the thought that I had been a pawn in their dangerous game, alone and vulnerable in that vast, shifting maze they created, still makes my skin crawl. Some nights when I can't sleep, I still dream of those endless, changing aisles, and the silent figures moving in the shadows. The Green Valley Superstore wasn't exactly known for its cutting-edge high fashion, let me tell you. Their clothing section was a pretty sad affair, mostly discount jeans and t-shirts with questionable slogans, but they had this one mannequin. Just one. It stood near the entrance to that meager clothing section, usually draped in whatever seasonal horror the regional manager from corporate deemed. On trend, think itchy acrylic sweaters in summer, or garish floral sundresses in the dead of winter. It was a female mannequin, one of those older, eerily realistic types, with glassy, vacant-looking blue eyes and a faint, permanently painted-on, slightly unsettling smile. Most people probably didn't give it a second glance, just another piece of store dressing. I started to notice it because my usual checkout lane, often lane 3, if I could snag it, had a direct, uninterrupted line of sight to it. And I'm a people watcher, or in this case, a mannequin watcher, apparently. It began with little things, the kind of stuff you'd absolutely dismiss at first. I'd be scanning groceries, beep, 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 lost in the rhythm. Look up for a second, and the mannequin's head would seem to be angled just a fraction of an inch differently than it was a few minutes before. Or a hand, previously resting by its side in that stiff, unnatural pose, would now have its plastic fingers slightly curled, as if it were about to grasp something or beckon. I'd blink, tell myself it was the harsh fluorescent lighting playing tricks, or just my tired eyes after a long, mind-numbing shift. Mannequins don't move. Everyone knows that. It's basic physics. But this shifts as I started calling them in my head became more noticeable, or maybe I just became more attuned to them. They were harder to dismiss as simple tricks of the light. One particularly slow Tuesday afternoon, when the store was dead quiet. I was absolutely sure its head was turned almost a full 10 degrees towards the main entrance of the store, as if it were watching people come in and out. An hour later, after a sudden rush of after-school customers, I looked again. It was facing straight ahead, back to its original, bland, forward-staring pose. I knew for a fact no staff had been near it. No one had been fussing with the display. It hadn't changed clothes. I felt a weird, cold prickle run up my spine. This was getting creepy. I started to pay closer attention, almost obsessively, making mental notes of its exact pose at the start of my shift, the angle of its head, the position of its arms, the direction of its unblinking, painted gaze. And sure enough, throughout the day, tiny, almost imperceptible adjustments would occur. The tilt of its head, the angle of an arm, the way its torso seemed to be leaning ever so slightly. It was never a dramatic movement, nothing that would make anyone else scream or point. Always subtle, something you could easily miss or rationalize away if you weren't specifically, neurotically looking for it. But it was happening. I wasn't imagining it. I cautiously mentioned it to a coworker, Sarah, during our break, trying to sound casual. Hey, have you ever noticed that mannequin near clothes, like moving a bit? She just laughed, nearly choking on her soda. You're spending way too much time staring at dummies, Mark. Maybe you need to get a real date. Take your mind off things. I felt my face flush with embarrassment. I didn't bring it up with anyone else again. Clearly, I was on my own with this. The feeling of being watched by that mannequin grew stronger, more pervasive. Its glassy blue eyes, though unmoving in themselves, seemed to follow me as I moved around my checkout station. When I walked past it on my way to the break room or the restroom, I could swear its head would subtly, almost imperceptibly, track my progress. It was deeply, profoundly unsettling. Was I cracking up? Was the monotony of the job finally getting to me? I started to consider more realistic explanations, desperately trying to fight off the growing, irrational dread. Could there be vibrations in the old store floor from the massive refrigeration units in the back? Or from heavy trucks rumbling past on the main road outside that were causing it to shift minutely, almost invisibly over long periods? The store was old and things settled. Or maybe it was a prank by some of the younger, mischievous staff, a very elaborate, very patient prank designed specifically to freak out the new guy at checkout 3. That seemed more plausible, more comforting than a haunted, moving gummy. But then I noticed something else, something that blew my prank and vibration theories out of the water. The mannequin wasn't just moving randomly. Its gaze, its subtle shifts in posture, often seemed to coincide with interesting, or rather suspicious events in the store. Once, I saw a known shoplifter, a shifty-looking guy we'd all been warned about in the morning briefing, nervously pocket a small, expensive electronic item from a nearby display. As he walked quickly, trying to look casual past the mannequin towards the exit, I could have sworn its head tilted almost imperceptibly in his direction, its painted eyes fixed on him with an unblinking stare. Later, when our store security guard, a burly ex-cop named Big Tony, discreetly stopped the guy at the exit, they found the stolen item. Coincidence? Maybe. Another time, a small child started to have a screaming, kicking tantrum near the front of the store, right by the entrance. The mannequin's head, previously facing forward towards the checkouts, was now angled slightly, but definitely towards the commotion. Its serene, painted smile looking strangely out of place, almost mocking against the backdrop of the child's distress. I began to suspect this wasn't just random movement. It was observation, targeted observation. But how And why my mind raced? My prank by coworkers theory started to crumble. The movements were too subtle, too consistent over long periods for bored teenagers with a can of silly string. The vibration theory didn't explain the seemingly directed nature of its gaze, its apparent focus on specific events. Then a chilling, deeply disturbing thought occurred, fueled by some true crime documentary I'd half-watched late one night. What if the mannequin wasn't just a mannequin? What if it was a disguise? A very clever, very creepy disguise for a hidden camera? Someone could be using it for covert surveillance, but who? Management for loss prevention in a really unorthodox, almost pervy way? That seemed unlikely. They had regular visible CCTV cameras all over the store, even if half of them were dummies or broken. So who else would want to watch, unseen? The implications were profoundly disturbing. If there was a camera hidden inside that thing, who was watching? And what or who were they looking for? The shoplifter incident had the mannequin somehow alerted security. That seemed far-fetched, technologically. But what if it wasn't about general shoplifters? What if it was about something else? Something more specific? A targeted surveillance of staff? Perhaps looking for internal theft? Or even creepier, was it someone with a more sinister personal agenda? Was it watching me for a reason? One evening, just before closing time, I was cashing out my till, the store almost empty, the lights already dimmed in some sections. I saw Mr. Henderson, the elderly, reclusive, and decidedly eccentric owner of the entire Green Valley Superstore chain, doing one of his rare, unannounced, almost ghostly walkthroughs. He was a strange old man, rarely seen, rumored to be a bit touched in the head. He paused by the mannequin, a thoughtful, almost fond, appraising expression on his wrinkled face. He reached out a thin, trembling hand and very gently, almost imperceptibly, adjusted the angle of its chin, then patted its cold, plastic hand before walking on, disappearing into the shadowy aisles. It was a brief, incredibly odd interaction, but it sent a shiver of pure ice down my spine. It felt proprietary. Was Henderson the one controlling it, like it was being controlled? Or was he just an eccentric old man with a strange fondness for a particular store display that reminded him of someone or something? The next day, I came in from my shift, and the mannequin was gone. Just an empty, dusty space where it used to stand. Sarah, my coworker, said she heard from one of the stock boys that it was being sent away for repairs or maybe an upgrade. It never came back, and no other mannequin ever took its place. I never found out the truth about that mannequin. Was it just an old, unstable dummy whose minute movements I'd overinterpreted due to stress, boredom, and an overactive imagination? Was it a sophisticated surveillance tool, part of some strange, covert loss prevention or staff monitoring operation by the store's eccentric owner? Or perhaps someone else entirely with access? Or was it simply a focus for my own anxieties and a monotonous, dead-end job? I lean towards the surveillance theory, however outlandish it sounds. The way Mr. Henderson interacted with it that night, it felt like more than just a store fixture. Perhaps he, or someone he employed, was using it to keep an eye on his investments, his staff, his customers, in a way that was both deeply intrusive and utterly deniable if discovered. A silent, unblinking, plastic eye hidden in plain sight. The crime here wasn't a violent one, not in the usual sense, but a creepy, pervasive, insidious invasion of privacy, a form of psychological control and observation that felt deeply wrong. I don't look at mannequins the same way anymore, not anywhere. I always check the eyes, the way they're angled. And I always wonder who or what might be looking back, silently, patiently, from behind those glassy, lifeless stares. It makes you realize that being watched doesn't always involve a person you can see. You know how you get used to a place, right? Especially your local supermarket. Green Valley Groceries wasn't fancy, but it was my supermarket. Every Tuesday evening, like clockwork, after my late shift at the city library, I'd pop in for my weekly shop. I knew the layout like the back of my hand, or so I thought. It started subtly, the kind of thing you just brush off. Figure it's your own memory playing tricks, or just the usual way stores move stuff around to make you buy more. A brand of imported coffee I always bought, suddenly on a different shelf, a lower one. My favorite brand of bland, healthy cereal inexplicably in aisle 6. The junk food aisle instead of aisle 7 where it had lived for years. Annoying, sure, but hardly sinister. Just odd. But then it got weirder, more specific. I'd reach for a can of baked beans, the store brand, and the one directly behind it. Hidden from casual view would be a brand I'd never seen before in my life. Something with Cyrillic lettering or strange Asian characters. No price tag, no English translation. The next week, it would be gone, replaced by the usual familiar cans. Or I'd find a single, completely out of place item in a bizarre location. A child's brightly colored plastic building block. A Duplo maybe sitting incongruously in the middle of the frozen fish sticks. A tarnished, old-fashioned silver locket, the kind your grandmother might have worn, nestled amongst a pile of russet potatoes. Little things, but unsettling. I'd point these out to the staff, usually a bored-looking teenager more interested in their phone, who just shrug, remove the item without a word, and look at me like I was the weird one for even noticing. The stocking, as I started to think of it, became more pointed, more personal, almost. One Tuesday, in the otherwise empty baking aisle. It was late, remember? Not many shoppers. All the bags of granulated sugar, dozens of them, had been arranged in a perfect, unsettlingly, almost ritualistic pyramid. Something no time-pressed, underpaid store employee would ever bother to do. It must have taken ages. Another time, the alphabet soup cans in aisle 3, the ones with the little pasta layers, were lined up meticulously to spell out a single chilling word: watching. I remember my blood running cold, a shiver tracing down my spine. I actually took a picture of that one with my phone, but when I plucked up the courage to show it to the store manager, a harried-looking, middle-aged woman named Mrs. Davison, she just sighed wearily and said kids were probably playing pranks again. We get a lot of bored teenagers in here after school. Messing about, she said. Though her eyes didn't quite meet mine, and she seemed more stressed than usual. But these weren't kid pranks. There was intelligence to it, a creepy deliberateness, a patience that was far beyond a teenager's fleeting mischief. And foreign or out-of-place items started to get more disturbing, more intimate. Once tucked behind a row of mint-flavored toothpaste boxes, I found a small, crudely made doll. The kind you see in horror movies, fashioned from what looked like dried straw and with shiny black buttons for eyes. It felt old, and somehow profoundly wrong. I didn't touch it. I just backed away slowly, my shopping forgotten for that night. I started to feel like I was being singled out. Like these things were meant specifically for me to find a silent, one-sided conversation. Paranoia, that old unwelcome friend, began to set in. Was someone following me? Did they know my routine, my habits? The supermarket, once a mundane weekly chore, became a place of heightened anxiety, of dread. I'd scan the aisles, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows between the shelves, observing me with unseen eyes. But there was never anyone out of the ordinary, just other shoppers, lost in their own worlds of grocery lists and budgets, and the usual apathetic, tired-looking staff. I considered changing supermarkets, of course, driving a few extra miles to the shiny new megamart across town. But a stubborn, perhaps foolish part of me wanted to understand who was doing this and why me. Was it a disgruntled employee with a seriously twisted sense of humor and too much time on their hands? Or was it something more calculated, more sinister? Was someone trying to drive me crazy? The messages became more frequent, more blatant. One evening, the magnetic letters on the children's educational toy display, usually a chaotic jumble from kids playing, were neatly arranged to spell out my car's license plate number. That was no coincidence. That was a direct, personal, terrifying threat. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely push my shopping cart. I felt a cold wave of nausea. I reported it to Mrs. Davison again, my voice trembling this time. This time, she looked genuinely concerned, or maybe just scared for her own job if this got out. She promised, her voice a little too high-pitched, to review all the security footage for that aisle immediately. The next week, she pulled me aside, her face grim. She told me the cameras covering that particular aisle had unfortunately malfunctioned that specific evening. A technical glitch they were looking into? Convenient. Far too convenient. Was she covering for someone? Or was the stalker clever enough, or perhaps privileged enough, to disable specific cameras when they needed to? I started to suspect it was an inside job. Someone with access to the store after hours, or someone who could move around unnoticed during opening times. Someone who knew the layout, the blind spots. Someone who knew me, or at least my shopping habits, my routine, the items they were leaving, the messages they were crafting. It felt like a game, a cruel, elaborate psychological game. But what was the end game? What did they want? Then came the incident with the special delivery, the one that finally pushed me over the edge. I was in the produce section trying to pick out some decent-looking tomatoes when I noticed a small, unmarked brown paper bag tucked discreetly behind a display of organic apples. My name, S-A-R-H-E, was written on it in neat, precise block letters in a black marker pen. My blood turned to ice. This was beyond a prank, beyond a creepy message. This was targeted, intimate harassment. With trembling fingers, my breath catching in my throat, I opened it. Inside were photographs. Photographs of me. Not just one or two. A dozen, at least. Taken from a distance, clearly with a zoom lens, but unmistakably me. Me leaving my apartment building that morning. Me walking to my car after work. Me shopping in this very supermarket, in this very aisle, on previous weeks, completely unaware. I almost screamed right there in the produce section. I felt violated, exposed, hunted. This unseen stalker wasn't just moving cans around or leaving creepy dolls. They were a full-blown stalker, a dangerous, obsessed one. They knew where I lived. They knew my routine. They knew my name. And they were letting me know they knew, clearly enjoying my terror, feeding off it. I went straight to the police this time, bypassing Mrs. Davison and Green Valley Groceries entirely. I showed them the bag, the photographs, told them about the messages, the out-of-place items, the whole disturbing pattern. They took it seriously, thank God, especially the photographs and the license plate incident. An officer, a detective, was assigned to my case. They interviewed the supermarket staff, checked employee records, looked for anyone with a history. The investigation, when it finally yielded results a few weeks later, revealed something chillingly mundane, yet utterly terrifying in its implications. One of the night shift stalkers, a quiet, unassuming, almost invisible man named Arthur Jenkins, who had worked there for over a year, had a prior conviction for stalking and harassment in another state. He'd been fired from his previous job for similar obsessive behavior towards a female colleague. When the police searched his locker at the supermarket and later his small, squalid apartment, they found a disturbing collection of small, strange items, similar to the ones I'd been finding, and a detailed handwritten logbook of my movements, my shopping habits, even notes on what I wore on different days. The foreign items were trinkets he'd picked up from various places, little trophies he used as his calling cards. The messages were his way of feeling powerful, of controlling me from afar, of inserting himself into my life in the most violating way. He'd been using his late-night access to plant these things, to watch me on the security cameras when he could, disabling others when he needed to get closer. He was the unseen stalker, my personal tormentor. Jenkins was arrested. He didn't resist. The strange occurrences at Green Valley Groceries stopped immediately. The supermarket suddenly felt like just a supermarket again, mundane and boring and blessedly normal. But for me, the illusion of safety in such a public, ordinary place was shattered forever. I still feel a prickle of unease when I walk down certain aisles in any store, still glance over my shoulder more than I used to, still scrutinize the faces of quiet, unassuming men. Because I know that sometimes the monsters aren't supernatural, aren't ghosts or demons. Sometimes they're just quiet, unassuming people who stalk the shelves, watching you from the shadows, turning the everyday into a landscape of intensely personal horror. And the scariest part is you might never see them, never know they're there, until they decide they want you to. And by then, it might be too late.